Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Lunch and Learn session. It's the 13th of March, 2024. My name is Gillian Askew, and I will be your host for today's session. Hopefully you can see the slides okay. It is a Lunch and Learn, so we have half an hour set aside. We do have quite a lot to cover in that time, so we will sort of canter through things today. I'll just give it a couple of seconds just to let people join, and then we'll get cracked on so we can get through everything that we need to get through. So just to say hi again, you might have been to a Go for Growth webinar before. So you might know me. If you don't know me, my name is Gillian Askew. I'm one of the co-founders of Go for Growth, and I'm your host for today's session. A couple of housekeeping things. So this session is being recorded today. A copy of the slide deck that you'll see and a copy of the recording will be sent out to you via email, probably over the next 2 to 3 days. So that will come out to you. As I said, it will be a fairly high level, bit of a canter through the agenda today. So if you want to have a more detailed conversation about anything that you hear from me today, please do get in touch. We can always put together a 30-minute Teams conversation or a telephone conversation, or we can chat via email or whatever it is. So if you do want to have a further conversation in more detail, please do give me a shout. Mine and my colleagues' contact details will be towards the back end of the slide deck, so you can get in touch with us. We are on Zoom as always, so you can say hi in the chat if you want to. You can ask questions in the Q&A function. I'll try and keep an eye on both as we go. We hopefully will have a few minutes at the end for any questions, but if we don't get to any Q&A today and you do have a burning question that you think of later or whatever, like I say, please do just get in touch. So today we're covering, as you can see on screen, the core parts of the tender process. We're going to look at the specification, the evaluation criteria, and we're going to look in a little bit of detail on how to answer quality questions. So we'll break down the structure of questions and give an overview of how to relate your response back to the specification and back to the scoring criteria. I've said it a couple of times already, but we are at high level today. So if you want to go into more detail after this event, then please do give us a shout. So there are a number of steps involved in any public procurement process. So you can find opportunities, both live and upcoming opportunities, things called prior information notices, future opportunities, in a number of ways. And lots of public sector organisations work on different e-procurement portals. So you might have heard of things like Atomis, Jagger, EU Supply, Your Tender, the Chest, Delta Resourcing, Intend, that kind of thing. They're all e-procurement portals where you would be actually fulfilling a bid. But you can also find things on Contracts Finder and Find a Tender Service. And they are Cabinet Office hosted, so government hosted. They're free search engines effectively. So the Find a Tender service is usually for anything over 118,000 total contract value, and Contracts Finder is usually for anything above 25,000 total contracts value, unless it's central government, and then it would be above 10,000 for central government. Those values are a total contract value. They're usually a maximum. They're not a guarantee of what you can achieve through the contracts, but it is some bids will specify things like a maximum cost that you can submit. Anything above that might be disqualified. So you might be entering day rates, which might have a cap on it. Or in the advertisement, it will say that the budget is 25,000 and we can't go any above that. So if you bid above that, you will be automatically disqualified, that kind of thing. Every process will have a clarification period where you can ask questions through the e-procurement portal. And that's there to clarify any information that would be useful for you to help with your bid. Our advice on clarifications is always to ask them early. Lots of providers might leave reading the documents until quite late in the process, but clarifications will have a cut-off time. So as soon as you get a bid, have a look at the invitation to tender, and we'll go through that in a second. But it will give you the key dates in those documents. So have a look when clarifications close, and make sure if you've got any questions that you ask those things early. You will submit your bid. There'll be one of the key dates that's in the documents will be around the submission date. It will have a date and a time usually. So that might be 13th of March at 12 p.m. If you're submitting through an EU portal, which you, generally speaking, you will be doing in public sector, again, our advice is don't leave it till the last second, because there are sometimes technical difficulties or the system might be busy. So do try to make sure you submit as early as you possibly can. And you will get an email through the portal to say that your submission has been accepted, and it will be time-stamped. So you'll submit your bid and it will go into evaluation. Evaluation is when it is effectively scored. And in public sector bids, what that scoring actually means is that your submission is scored against the evaluation criteria, the scoring criteria, how you've answered the question in relationship to the specification. And you're not compared with other bidders until all of the scoring has been done. And so that's the evaluation process. And that can often be a lengthy process. So depending on the size and complexity of the bid, that could be weeks. And in some cases, that might be months. But again, in the key dates at the top end of that invitation to tender document, you should have all of those dates. So it will at least make you aware of how long evaluation will take. Once evaluation has been completed, depending on the kind of procurement it is, if there are winners and losers, you'll be notified of whether you're successful or unsuccessful. And it's called an intent to award. So the contracting authority will intend to award to whomever, and they will write to the successful parties and say, we intend to award to you. And if you're unsuccessful, you'll have a letter to say, we intend to award to X organisation. Sadly, you've been unsuccessful. What you should get is some feedback through that process. So if you were successful, you will get your score. If you were unsuccessful, you should get, as a bare minimum, your score versus the winning bidder's score. Good feedback would be giving you enough detail so that you can work through where it is that you had gaps in comparison to the winning bidder, so that you can think about how you might be able to improve that process in the future. Generally speaking, over threshold, and I'll talk to you about the thresholds in a second, but over threshold, there will be something called a standstill period. A public sector organisation can voluntarily use standstill even under threshold. The standstill is 10 calendar days, and it doesn't include the day that it starts. And standstill can't complete on a weekend or a bank holiday, for example. So that's that 10-day period from intent to award is where you, as an unsuccessful bidder, have the right to challenge the process and challenge the outcome if you want to. So that's what that's there for. I mentioned thresholds a second ago. So they just changed on the 1st of January this year. So for non-central government departments, the supplies and services threshold inclusive of VAT is currently £214,904. For central government for supplies and services, that's £139,688. It's the same for works in both central government and non-central government departments of £5,372,609, again, inclusive of VAT. And there is something called the light touch regime, which if it's in social care, for example, the light touch regime might be at play, which gives the contracting authority a higher threshold and greater flexibility on process. And the current threshold for light touch regime is 663,540, and that didn't change on the 1st of January. So that's been the same for a little while. So let's dive into specification a little bit more. The specification, and sometimes it's called a statement of requirements. I know for certain contracting authorities, that's what they call it. But basically, it's a description of what the contracting authority wants to buy. And it is a really crucial document in any bid. Our advice would be, and certainly, and it's a very personal thing how you choose to navigate a bid, but certainly one of the things that we do when we're bidding in Go for Growth, one of our first jobs is to read through the specification really thoroughly, or the statement of requirements, whatever it's called. And what we would typically be doing is making notes of any questions that we might have for the contracting authority that we would need to ask through the clarification process to help us understand things that might be need some further explanation. What we also do is note the evidence that we've got that would be able to, we would be able to use to demonstrate our capability and our capacity almost as we look through the specification. But we'll also make a note of any gaps that we think we might have, and that can be a useful exercise if you have a bid, no bid, go, no go kind of decision-making process that you want to go through. How much of the specification do I have in my toolkit? Can I do this? If in some cases, if you're thinking that you might need to work with other organizations, for example, form a consortium or collaboration or a partnership or something, actually the specification can be really useful to help you do that. However, that's quite difficult if you haven't formed a collaboration at the point where a bid is live, because it can take some time to do that. But it can certainly help you figure out how much of what the contracting authority wants to buy can you do and can you deliver, and how you think you can deliver that. And it's a useful document when you're completing the technical and quality questions. So you'll be relating back to the specification, and what you might see in bids is, here is the question, and it might actually take you to the relevant section in the specification. And so we'll talk about how we answer questions in a second, but effectively what the specification and then the evaluation questions are doing, they're testing your ability to deliver what's needed. And so referencing back to the specification will hopefully help to enhance your scores. Effectively, you're taking the evaluator on a journey. You want to buy X, Y, Z. I can deliver you X, Y, Z, and here is the evidence of how I do that. So you're showing your understanding of the specification and your ability to deliver. It's worth noting that in evaluation, so there's two types of scoring criteria in a bid. You've got selection and you've got evaluation. Selection effectively looks at the organisation and the things that you've got in your toolkit, like your insurances, your accreditation. It'll look at licenses. It will think about your financial and economic standing, and it will look at things like your references of other people that you've worked with and for. So it's not quite a look backwards, but it's a look at the organisation. The evaluation is really testing then your ability to deliver the specification. And so you should only be tested in evaluation things that are included in the specification. So if you're being asked a question in quality questions and it doesn't relate back to the specification, then you can actually ask a question about it. Let me just see, because I think we've got, okay, there's some IT problems, I think, going today, but I will send out links to everybody. So hopefully you will, if you are struggling today, you'll get all the information if you've registered after. So apologies. In terms of evaluation criteria, in every competitive process, regardless of value, what it should have in it is how the award will be made. So usually it's a sliding scale from a scoring perspective, maybe 0 to 100, 1 to 5, something like that. And there will be details of what each score means. So as I said, there's two different types of criteria: procurement, selection, evaluation. Selection is looking at the business, testing that you have everything that you need, like your insurances, accreditations. And the evaluation is a bit more of a look forward. What will you do to be able to deliver the specification? And the question will be centered around that. So you'll be thinking about answering the question backed up by what evidence you might have linking back to that specification. And we'll go through a question in a second. What we recommend is reading the scoring carefully and answering that with the scoring criteria in mind. So when you read back over your submission, or actually even better, if you can ask someone else in your organisation or even externally actually to have a look over your submission, can they have a look at the evaluation criteria, that scoring criteria? What's the definition of how you score the top marks, a 5 or a 100? And have you evidenced that? Have you met that criteria? Can you see that demonstrably and tangibly in your answer? So in questions as well, you'll also have weightings. So weightings denote how much of 100% of the score that particular question has been given. So the higher the weighting, the more important the question, and therefore the more important the answer. You might have word counts and page counts that are applicable. So they are a constraint that we need to take into account. But if, let's say for argument's sake, there were 3 questions, all with the same word count. Question 1, 500 words, for example, had a weighting of 50%. Question 2 had a weighting of 30%. Question 3 had a weighting of 20%. You can see from those weightings which is most important, and that will help you understand where to focus your effort when you're answering those questions. And so I've got another slide on this that will show this in a bit more detail, but effectively what we're going to go through in a second is breaking down a quality question into the verb elements, the doing elements of it. And there are some tips on here. So it feels like a very obvious thing to say to make sure that you only answer the question that's asked. But I've been in procurement for 30 years. I've sat both sides of the bidding table. I've let contracts for private and public sector, and I've answered them for private and public sector as well. And no matter how much you do it and how much experience you have, it is really easy actually to fall foul of writing what you want to write as opposed to being guided by the question. So some things that we always say is only answer the question that's been asked. Don't repeat the question in the answer part of the quality question. Evidence your answers as much as you can. So the question asks me for A, I can do A, and here's how I can demonstrate to you that I can do A, because I've either done it before, or here is the evidence of what I will do that will back it up. If you're asked for any documents, definitely provide them. So you might be asked for things like a risk register, an implementation plan. If you are asked for anything specific, always include those, because it will not help your scores if you don't include them. And page counts and word counts, I do talk about them a lot, but if there's a page count, there might often be a font size specified with it. So 4 pages of Arial 12, for example, or a word count, as I talked about a second ago, 500 words. Don't exceed those constraints. What will happen in the governance checks before evaluation starts, anything that goes outside of those word or page counts will simply be redacted, and the evaluator probably just won't even see it. And it could mean that your answer is out of context, or the best part of your answer was in the redacted element of it. So although it feels, again, very obvious to say it, double check, triple check that you haven't gone over the word count, you haven't gone over the page count, and you are using the font size that's specified if it has been specified. I would also say, if you're wanting to put additional documents in, make sure that's permissible and in what formats, because people might only accept Word or PDF, for example, and they might not accept an Excel document. If you're using diagrams or tables, it's worth checking whether they're permissible and whether any wording in those diagrams or Excel tables, for example, would be included in the word count. So all of that should be very clear. But if it isn't, then do let us know. Do ask a question. So on this slide, what it's trying to show is that what I was just talking about in terms of breaking down the quality questions. So these are real questions from a real procurement in public sector from last year. And there are 3 questions on there. So what you can see is that question number 1 around care plans. What I've highlighted in yellow on there are the doing elements. So this first question is asking you about care plans. So are they individually tailored, number 1? Are they person-centered and meet the needs and outcomes of the person? In your answer, what they're asking you to do is state how you will ensure those care plans are kept up to date, and the measures that you've got in place to ensure people are involved in their care planning, and how you link with partners to ensure those needs are met. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements of that question. And what we try to do when we're bidding, and the advice we give is, when you're writing your answer, tick off that you have answered those parts of the question. In relationship to the specifications, though, the specification will tell you about their expectation on care plans and how they want to bring that to life, and in line with the evaluation criteria in terms of how you fulfill the best possible scoring that you can. And you can see on there that there is a constraint of 600 words and no attachments are allowed. So you need to make sure that you don't go over 600 words, but it has the highest weighting of the 3 questions on screen. It has got a 25% weighting. So you know that of the 3 questions, actually, that's where you need to focus your effort. And on the second question, again, there's 3 verb elements. It's about seeking feedback, about how the service might be improved and how you evidence that that feedback has been acted upon. 200 words constraint on that one and a 15% weighting. And then what you'll often see is questions that are not scored. So you can see on this third question, it's for information only. But you are still, you've got 100 words to write on it, and there are 2 verb elements. It's about supporting people and their participation in the local community. And then how do you get others involved with your service? So you can see on those 3 questions that breaking down, hopefully breaking down that verb element of the question will help you make sure that you're answering all of the question, relating it back to what the specification says about care plans in this situation. You can see the weighting and you can see the number of words that you have allocated to it. And in every question, you can apply that sort of logic and methodology. So you can literally highlight in every single quality or social value question, actually, or a technical question, whatever they're called, what the actual question is asking you for. You can break it down into those chunks, and then you can tick off each of those parts. And you can double check that it meets the specification, and you can double check whether you think your answer will help you get the best possible score. So I know that, and this has been a super quick canter through, it can feel actually quite a lonely and isolating place, bidding. We know this. And this slide is just about saying help is on hand, you're not alone. Go for Growth is here to help you, regardless of who you're bidding for, or if that's a grant funding application, for example. And we have helped lots of organisations with other types of funding applications like lottery funding, some of the foundation funds that are around. They'll have often criteria and constraints very similar to commission services in the public sector. So if you do have any support requirements for any sort of funding application, Go for Growth is here to help. The video library is on screen. There's lots of tutorial videos in there. Today's video will become one of them in a few days' time, or mine and my colleagues' emails are there. And we've also got an open bookable calendar. So if you want to book a 30 minutes Teams, coffee and a catch up, you've got to bring your own coffee, but we'll be there to help bring the support. So please don't feel like you're in there trying to do it all alone. We are here to help. And if you want to stay in touch with Go for Growth, you can. You absolutely don't have to. We don't spam. We don't send newsletters out. What we tend to write to people about are hopefully useful things around opportunities that are coming up in the public sector. So if you do want to get updated, you can scan that QR code, or it will be in the post-event survey that comes out as well. And that was it from me today. So I just wanted to say thank you all for joining, and I will just open up and see if there are any questions from anyone, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Let me have a look and see if we have. So I've got nothing in the chat at the moment, and I can't see anything in Q&A. I know that everyone's super busy, so we always try not to keep anybody here if they have got other places that they need to be. And if you are a small business on the call, you will definitely have other places that you need to be at all times, for sure. So if you do have a question at a later date, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We'll be happy to chat to you about anything and everything to do with public sector or private sector funding applications as well. So do just give us a shout. We'll get this out to everybody as soon as we possibly can. We've got some annual leave in the team at the moment, so it might be a couple of days before it comes out, but the slide deck and a recording of the video will come out. And again, do just give us a shout. Thank you for taking time out of your day. It's been lovely to see so many of you here. Give us a shout if we can be of any further help, and have a really good rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.